2024 is almost over, but before we take a look at the best Hollywood had to offer this year, it's time to take a look at the top 10 worst. Number 10, Piece by Piece. I have absolutely no idea who this movie was for. There is no reason for this to have been Lego. It just feels like Farrell wanted it to be Lego so it would stand out from other biopics. You don't really do anything to take advantage of that medium. Unlike other Lego movies, there's no humor, there's no self-awareness, there's no satire. If you in the Lego form, it's sort of a satire of biopics like the Weird Al movie or Surf's Up. But no, if you replace the Lego with live action, it's the exact same movie. I feel like it was only made in Lego because they thought it might maybe give them a shot at getting nominated for Best Animated Film Oscar. Who is the audience for this? Kids will find it boring, and I don't think many adults are clamoring to watch a Lego movie about Pharrell Williams. On top of that, the movie is PG, but despite that technically kid-friendly rating, you can tell it really wants to be PG-13. Ironically, by using the Lego format to express himself, Pharrell actually limits himself because of how much they'll let him do in the Lego setting. This feels like 2 hours of Pharrell and his friends in the music industry getting together and saying, "Yes, we are. Look how awesome it is to be a celebrity." The big problem with this is that Pharrell produced the movie himself, so of course he's not going to include anything that makes it look bad. What makes biopics interesting is it shows the subject's good and bad sides. This is just 100% of Pharrell essentially patting himself on the back. Ironically, the movie that actually is called The Lego Movie feels like less of a commercial than this does. This whole film just feels so self-indulgent. There's a line in this movie that Farrell says, "Relevance is a drug," which seems so hypocritical, since it seems the only reason for this movie's existence is for him to stay relevant. This also feels like Universal Studios reminding us, hey, we made Despicable Me. Remember how much you loved that happy song 10 years ago? Remember? We did that. Praise us. What makes biopics interesting is the struggles of the subject of the biopic, and this doesn't have any of that. Pharrell is just a guy who's in the right place at the right time and near the right people. There's no juice, there's no meat, there's no conflict. If a very, very small niche who is into both Lego and Pharrell Williams, wait to stream it. And this idea doesn't appeal to you, you're not missing out, and it's not going to surprise you. Number 9, Borderlands. There's a line in this movie from Jack Black's character. I calculate our chances of survival at 0%. That never happens. That was my reaction to waking up the morning this came out, is thinking that at the time, this movie had a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's gone up slightly. Last time I checked, it was at like 7%, but that's still drastically bad. And to be honest, I can see why. I've never played the game, so my only exposure to this was the trailer, and I thought, this looks fun and I like the cast, I'll give this a shot. I like cheesy video game movies like Street Fighter or the 1995 Mortal Kombat. And what I got was not a complete disaster, but I won't say this film was competently made either. What it does well is the aesthetic of the planet, and the action is pretty well done too. Unfortunately, the film is marred by paper-thin characters, jokes that fall flat, and a plot that just isn't that interesting. How thin are these characters? If you thought the line from Suicide Squad, "This is Katana, she's got my back," was the worst way to explain a character, that line looks well thought out by comparison to these characters. Literally, the only 2 out of 5 characters that have any sort of development or arc are Kate Blanchett and Ariana Greenblatt. The rest of the characters are just there. But even then, Greenblatt, you can tell she's having fun in this movie, has a very paper-thin character. She's essentially the story's MacGuffin, but they also try really hard to give her a tragic backstory while also making her part of the team, and I don't know. I don't think it worked. But the huge, huge shame about this movie is this is a great cast. Kate Blanchett, Jack Black, and Kevin Hart are all great in other stuff, just not here. I haven't seen a Jack Black performance this unfunny since Shark Tale. Not a single line that came out of this character, who is supposed to be the comic relief, was even remotely funny. And considering this was being marketed as being similar to Suicide Squad or Guardians of the Galaxy, which are movies about a bunch of misfits that hate each other and then come to love each other in the end, meanwhile spewing witty banter, there's no witty banter. The villain is also very paper thin and just lousy. What a disaster this movie is. Based on feedback from people who have played the game, they seem to really hate it. And I, who hasn't played the game, didn't find it all that entertaining either. It's just a poor man's Suicide Squad. Number 8, Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie. I haven't really watched any new SpongeBob in like 10 years, unless you count the Sponge on the Run movie from a few years ago, so I could review it for November. I've still like classic SpongeBob, but it seems that ever since the first movie, it's really gone downhill. One of my biggest complaints is, why is this entire movie CGI? What happened to good old-fashioned 2D animation? In the second movie, the CGI parts made sense because they went from Bikini Bottom to the surface, so that was to differentiate it. But in the third movie and this one, it just seems odd. And the CGI isn't even very good. It looks like graphics from a Nintendo GameCube game from the early 2000s. The plot is boring and uninteresting. The live action doesn't blend well at all with the CGI, unlike the first movie. The villain's motivations and plan are stupid, and I find it hypocritical that even the film is portraying wanting to merchandise the SpongeBob characters as this evil plan, even though Nick has been doing the same thing for 25 years. In fact, this movie's very existence is an example of that. I can't remember any particularly funny jokes or moments or anything quotable. The Sandy Cheeks movie is scraping the bikini bottom of the barrel. Number 7, Harold and the Purple Crayon. How did this get greenlit? Seriously, page book with no conflict. Age up the talented character who's an adult, give him an existential crisis. Because that's what all great kids' movies need. And make the main character, who is a child in a book written for the 3 to 5 year old crowd, a 40 something man child. So stupid. How is this the same director as Ice Age and Rio? I'm not gonna act like those movies were masterpieces or anything. They were at least decent. There's so many problems with this movie. For one, when Harold enters the real world, which happens about 5 minutes in, so there's pretty much no build up to this, he's a live action human, but his friends the Moose and Porcupine are also live action humans, which doesn't make sense. I mean, Porcupine characters in the movie so little, I kept forgetting she was a character. This feels like a movie that was written 20 years ago and is just now being made. It feels for movies like Elf and Enchanted, where the manic pixie dream boy or dream girl character enters an unfamiliar world, has an existential crisis, and wins the hearts and skeptics of naysayers. Ironically, Zooey Deschanel is in this and doesn't play the manic pixie dream girl character. It has all the 2000s movie cliches. The humor is just not funny. There's a joke where a bunch of old men call Zooey Deschanel's phone number and start flirting with her. The villain is unhealthily obsessed with Zooey Deschanel, and he ends up being rewarded for his creepy behavior. For a movie that keeps talking about the power and creativity of imagination, there's nothing creative or imaginative here. This is absolutely one of the worst kids' movies I have ever seen. There's nothing to value here. I've seen better scripts written by a 5 year old in crayon. Number 6, The Union. Halle Berry, Mark Wahlberg, J.K. Simmons, cast like that, this seems like it would be fun. But unfortunately, this film was so dry and bland. It seems like there's a very specific audience for this film, men in their 40s and up. And I'm not part of that audience, so it's hard to relate to this movie. As far as the spy element goes, it's pretty forgettable and generic. Wahlberg and Barry don't have any chemistry and are not that entertaining to watch. Wahlberg's character is not that charming or likable. The humor in this movie feels very forced and awkward. Simmons gets a few chuckles every once in a while, but that's really it. This is just a bland, forgettable background noise movie, and it's not worth your time, even if you are a fan of the actors. Number 5, Uglies. I was expecting this movie to be pretty generic, but this surpassed my expectations for how bad it was. It was released 10 years too late, but it should have been released during the Hunger Games and Divergent craze. The film's biggest glaring issue is that they cast very conventionally attractive people to play the uglies. That, in and of itself, immediately destroys the whole idea the movie is trying to convey. And it's hard for us to feel sympathy for how the uglies are treated because, well, they're all pretty darn attractive. The villain is incredibly obvious, and the film offers nothing new that we haven't seen in other YA adaptations such as The Giver and Hunger Games. The film could have something relevant to say in the days of Instagram filters and celebrities getting so much plastic surgery that they become unrecognizable, but any positive messages this film might have had are completely negated by the end. By the end, the film feels just like the pretties the film is speaking out against. Very, very bland and fake. Number 4, If. I know a lot of people really adored this film, and I can see why, but since one of the plot lines is about going through heart surgery, and I'm being a survivor of 3 of those, this was a movie I found particularly triggering. That's not a word I use lightly. I thought this was just way too heavy for a family film. First off, the movie straight up opens with a montage of the main character's mom dying of cancer. Now, dead parent in a kid's film, okay, that's pretty typical, but as the film goes on, it gets more depressing, because John Krasinski's character is spending a few days in a hospital preparing for a heart surgery, and like I said, I've already gone through that 4 times having some hospital stays. I found this movie very triggering, because it's not just a minor plot point, it's pretty key to the third act. What threw me over the edge with this movie was when the main character's grandma gets a call. Oh, we need to go to the hospital. Something's wrong with your dad. The little girl has to watch her dad almost die. So, yeah. If you've ever had to watch a loved one die in the hospital, it's pretty triggering. And it was definitely a triggering movie for me. I think John Krasinski hates kids because this was definitely a movie that seems like they want to make kids cry. Personal triggers aside, and looking at this impartially, the movie is still not well thought out. For one, the rules of the movie are very unclear. For some reason, only the kid can see the imaginary friends, even though she's trying to find new kids for them. And they never explain why she can see them and why nobody else can. And Ryan Reynolds can usually bring up a bad movie, but he's not doing anything interesting or funny to say or do. At the end of the day, this is just a straight up ripoff of Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. The main imaginary friend is also named Blue, despite being purple. It's too heavy and boring for kids, and adults won't get anything out of it either. Number three, Lisa Frankenstein. Now, what's good about this film is the aesthetic. It looks more like a colorful Tim Burton film. It was sort of mixed between Warm Bodies and Edward Scissorhands. Most of the humor worked. There was a lot of macabre humor that really set the film in its own world. Unfortunately, there was also a lot of vulgar sex-related humor that was lowbrow and brought the film down for me quite a bit. And the last half hour of this movie is problematic. The film started out pretty cute, but then it goes into a very uncomfortable direction that's necrophilia. It also somewhat glorifies suicide. Because after the last 30 minutes, I was really enjoying most of this film, but because of those elements, I can't really recommend it for young teenagers, so just wait to rent it on ClearPlay or something. That being said, I do think Zelda Williams is a good director, and I hope she gets more work, and not just out of nepotism because she's the daughter of Robin Williams. She has actual talent, so maybe her next movie will be a bit cleaner and a bit better. Number two, Madam Web. This is a very frustrating film because it has a lot of style at times, but when it comes to the execution, it's an underdeveloped mess. Now, it is unique, feeling like a combination of the first Terminator film mixed with Final Destination, and has some cool ideas, but the ideas work better as ideas rather than how it was actually written and executed. The dialogue is cringy, ADR is off, the performances all around are pretty weak. The film doesn't really give us any reason to care about the characters by the end of the film. It's a mess. And the worst movie of 2024 is Night Swim. Now, January movies tend to get a bad reputation because they're generally not very good. Now, there are exceptions like Cloverfield, Woman in Black, or Megan. This is not one of them. This movie was awful. It's stupid and boring. It's the worst horror movies, but that's no excuse how bad this movie is. The first two-thirds are pretty effective with the creepy atmosphere. It's a good psychological horror. The movie disappoints in the last third. The characters are all pretty generic, and the dialogue is clunky. There's some effective scares, but overall, this is just a ripoff of Poltergeist. A Pooltergeist, if you will. It's a movie about a haunted swimming pool. Someone wrote this, pitched it, and then someone else decided it was good enough to fund. It's a stupid idea with stupid execution that sinks to the bottom. Let me know your 10 worst movies of 2024, and I will see you next time.